imagine that you're a human being who wants to be able to build like this. In fact, sometimes you're inspired to build something in Minecraft, and you see a cool build like this or some kind of reference photo, or you have a genius idea and you decide, you know what, I'm gonna build something really cool today. And so you get out your blocks and you start placing blocks, and then you build something, and then you step back and you take a look at that build, and you know in your heart that it is going to be an absolutely incredible build. It ends up looking like this. Shit, I would never say anything rude about your lovely build, but if this is what it looks like, you might want to reconsider what you're doing. But in all seriousness, we all start somewhere. I mean, I didn't pop out the womb making builds like this. They were not as good when I began. Hello, everybody. I am Jinx, and today is part 2 of my building guide. Part 1 is out. It's an overview and a building process guide. If you want to watch that before you watch this one, you can. It's not necessary, though. However, it's there if you're interested. It has more building tips. Today, I'm going to be talking about how you can get from something like this to something like this. And we're going to be breaking a build like this down into a bunch of shapes, and I'll show you how I use those shapes to plan out and create a build that looks kind of like this. Short disclaimer that I'm only going to be talking about the shapes today, because if I covered everything that goes into the build behind me, then we'd be here for way longer than you want to be around me, I'm sure. That is why it is important for you to subscribe to this channel, because I'm going to be putting out more videos which go over different tips, and slowly but surely, as we release more videos, we'll be able to get to a point where we have an extensive building guide with everything that you probably need to know in order to be able to build like this. But the question is, how do you take your build from something like this to something like this? And the real answer is that there's a lot of things, and today we're going to be focusing on one of them, and that is shapes. Fatal flaw with this build, as you may be able to see, is that it's, well, I mean, there's a few fatal flaws, but one of them, the one we're going to focus on today anyway, is that the thing is a square. The block palette is not that bad. It could be worse anyway. You picked out some interesting blocks. You even tried a little bit of texture. It's not that great of texture, but you tried a little bit. Look at the wood on the top, and look at, it's got stripes. Heck, you even put a chimney on there. Look at you and your detailing. But I bet we could turn this build into something a whole lot better by primarily just focusing on shapes. Because that fatal flaw, as I was maybe going to say, is that this thing is like a square with a triangle on top of it. It looks like those houses we all drew when we were little children. That, you know, they look like this. Not the greatest thing anyone's ever seen. It's not very inspiring. I mean, it's a square. Welcome to my creative testing world. Here there is 2 builds. It's basically the exact same thing. I need to blow this up. Hold on. This building does not need to be seen by the eyes of human beings. Oh, that kind of worked. That wasn't very effective. Goodbye. And good as new. It's like nothing even was there ever. What was I even saying? Oh, right. Welcome to my current build testing world. This is some of the builds I've made over time, and I think the thing I was maybe going to point out is that you can see that they're not squares. I don't know what I'm saying. Anyway, let's get on to the lesson for today. Now, here's a block palette. This block palette is based off the blocks that I used to make this build, and we could technically actually use them to make the build look a bit better, I'd imagine. And I did texture it a little bit, and, well, I don't know if it really improved the build much, to be honest. It's a bit better. It's a bit better. Even texturing cannot save this build. It's a bit small for all these blocks. I don't know. We'll see. I did disprove a point. There was a point to this. The point is that this is too square and too triangle. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to fix that problem and how to make your builds more interesting using shapes. This is part 2 of my building guide. Part 1 is out, and you don't need to watch it to understand what's going on in this video, but I might reference it, so it could be helpful. There is a playlist. It will be linked in the bio, probably. Well, let's get into it. This part of the building does take place during the wireframing phase of building, which is like the 3rd phase, I think, if I remember correctly. I don't know. This information is in part 1 of the building guide, the overview and build process. But a quick rundown about what wireframing is. It is essentially planning out the build by building the outline first. In my inventory, you can see all of this colored wool, and I don't usually use colored wool for this step. You don't have to. I usually just use like one block, like a white wool, or you know, whatever I feel like using. But it can be helpful, and I'm going to use it in this video to differentiate the shapes that I'm talking about while I build, to hopefully make things more clear. What not to do. Let me introduce you to the wireframe of this abomination. If you're building a house that's a square with a triangle on top of it, you probably really aren't doing this step anyway. But if you were to break down the shapes that this house is, this is what you would get. It is terrible. As you can see, there's a square. I mean, this is a cube, and on top of it, there is a triangular prism or a pyramid. I don't know what you call this shape, but it's whatever this is. A hat? I don't know. It's a triangle. It's a two-dimensional three-dimensional It's a three-dimensional triangle. Now, you can see by looking at this already that it's not a particularly inspiring build. Like nothing you can do to this is going to make it that interesting. You can add all the texture and the color you want, and it's still probably going to be kind of boring because, I mean, it's just a square with a triangle. I could probably add a few more details to this thing, but in all seriousness, I don't think I could improve this build very much without making some significant changes to it. There's just not many options for you to do. Like, I could try adding a little bit more detail and try cleaning up the texturing. It's just not going to look that good no matter what I do, though. This is just about the best it can possibly be. Even if you aren't that great at detailing or texturing, adding a bunch of different shapes is going to make your build automatically, because the shapes are unique. Having more shapes means you can have unique shapes, which means there's just more to look at, which by default makes your build more interesting. It's very important. In fact, I might argue that this is pretty much the most important thing that you could possibly do for a build. I'm now going to show you what is a correct thing to do. Correct is a very loose term. I mean, it's all subjective at the end of the day, but what is better than this, I guess? Bad. Good. I'm going to break this down because looking at it initially might be a little bit difficult. So I just want to say, though, that while this shape, or rather shapes, is very interesting, it's very simple at the same time. It looks a lot more complicated than it is anyway. We'll go one at a time, but all I've done here is I've put a bunch of simple shapes together, basically. So at the bottom here, this red rectangle, because this is what this is, it's a rectangular prism, I have the foundation of the house. This will be made out of stone, as on medieval builds they typically had like stone bottoms, well, because that makes sense, it's more structural. And again, all this is a rectangular prism. Very simple shape. It's a cube but long. On top of it, I have another rectangular prism, which is a little bit larger, this green one right here. This green shape is going to be filled in with this white kind of color palette right here, and this makes up the main bulk of the build. This is going to be the main walls and stuff. Then right above that, we have the roof in yellow, which is a very simple triangular prism, as you can see. We all know what these shapes are, right? This orange one off to the side right here is a bit more interesting because it's got a rounded front, but it's kind of just like a rectangular prism with a rounded front. Back here we have what will be the chimney, which is, once again, a rectangular prism, but quite tall. Then I have this big tower, which is a cylinder. And then out the front here, we have another very small square. I mean, I guess this is technically a rectangular prism, but it's only one block further out, so that's fine, with another little roof on top of it. This one, a taller triangular prism, just to add a bit more depth to the front of this house. So how do you go about doing something like this? How do you get from something boring like this to something interesting like this? Well, there's a couple of answers here, and the simple answer is that you just kind of need to experiment. You just need to try stuff. Put something down, put a square somewhere, see if it's good. If it's good, put another square somewhere else or whatever. I just made this one rectangle at a time. I made the foundation rectangle, and then I made this rectangle on top of it, and then I made this rectangle out to the side and rounded off the front, and then I put the triangle on the roof, and then I made this big tower here, which is just a cylinder, and I was just doing it one thing at a time. I would build a shape, I would add another shape, I would step back, I would take a look, I'd say, does that look good? And I would just kind of keep adding stuff on. But for a long answer, we can get a bit more specific into why I placed things in a certain way. First things first, on medieval building, it's pretty common to see the foundation of the house be smaller than the top of the house, or the bulk of the house, I guess. I don't really know what you call this. I'm not an architect. You can find stuff like this out by just using reference photos, and using reference photos is always a good thing to do. Just look up medieval houses and you can see examples of what I'm talking about. You can also take these reference photos and break down the shapes within them. You can see rectangles and more rectangles and triangles and stuff like that. The other thing that I was thinking about when building this is balance. Balance is something that's important on a build. You don't want one side to seem like too overwhelming, or one side to have all the detail whereas the other side doesn't have anything. This is kind of a weird concept to explain. I'm actually going to maybe delete this so that you can tell what I'm talking about here. Kind of ignore the corners because you can kind of see where the build was. But now you can see that the build looks like on the left side of the build now, it looks really heavy almost in comparison to the right. There's just nothing going on here. It's very abrupt. There's way more happening on the left, and this is what I mean by unbalanced. Honestly, this isn't too bad, but it does just seem like there should be something over here. Add all this back in now. Oh, the things I do for you people. You'd all better be excellent builders after this with the amount of blocks I am placing. You can see when I add this back on, though, the build looks more complete now, and that's what balance is at the end of the day. What you don't want to do is make your build symmetrical, because making a symmetrical build tends to not look that good. To be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure why. If I had to take a guess, I would say it's because you're just don't have as much to look at. I mean, if the build looks the exact same on both sides, then you only have to look at half the build in order to know what the entire build is, and so since there's less to look at, the build is less interesting. Symmetry is not always a bad thing, but when I'm building, I tend to try and make things not symmetrical, because I kind of think that looks better, especially on a large scale like this. It looks, if you can, it's a lot better to vary the build on different sides so that it's not the exact same. One of the other big things I try to do is I try and kind of keep, and this has a little bit to do with the balance, but I try and keep the height kind of consistently moving in one direction. So you can see here that the lowest part of the build is on the right, and then in the middle, it's, well, in the middle, and then on the left side, it's the tallest. And it creates a bit of a slant, like so. This is partially just to help break up the symmetry, but also it kind of helps force your eye along the build. Like, you might start looking over here and then kind of look up this way, where you can see this little guy is in the middle, and then you'll look further over to the tower, which is the tallest. There's kind of 3 tiers of height for this build. And the other big thing that I do, I guess the final big thing that I do when I'm adding shapes to a build, is I try and just break up boring shapes. So, for example, this giant rectangular prism right here was just a giant rectangle, and so I wanted to add something to break it up, which is also partially why I added this guy in the middle. Some of the reason that I add stuff comes from necessity. For example, having a chimney on the build made sense as a thing to have, and so I decided to throw it over here to help try and balance out this tower a little bit. But at the end of the day, again, this entire step is partially just going to have to be trial and error. You are not going to be able to just throw something together first try and it's going to be perfect. I've been doing this for a long time, and I still basically use trial and error during this step. I mean, you didn't see when I was building this, but there was quite a bit of building and then deleting and then building and then trying something slightly different. A lot of deleting blocks, a lot of building blocks. That's why you plan stuff out, because it makes the whole process a lot easier. But ultimately, you want to be able to step back and look at it and say, ah, yes, this looks interesting. Instead of, you know, looking like this and there's just nothing happening. It's very, very boring. There's a lot of different shapes here, and they're all very simple shapes, but put together, the overall shape is very interesting. I like this top-down view because you can really see how simple everything is from here. Like, over on the left, we have the orange rectangle with a slightly rounded front, and then in the middle, we have a red rectangle, and then a slightly larger green and yellow, which are the same size rectangle, and then we have a rectangle that is purple, and we have this kind of pink line, I guess, and then we have a blue circle, which is... how did I build... What? Hold on. This circle is not a circle. Oh, I see what happened. Okay, now it's a circle, as you can see. Most of these shapes are super easy to build. I will also say that building circles and stuff isn't necessarily super easy in Minecraft because it is a block game and everything is a cube. So learn how to build pixel shapes. Like, go to pixel art thing and build circles. That's kind of how I learned how to build circles, and now I don't have to do it. There's also like programs you can use that help you build circles out of pixels. If you need to build like a huge circle, you can do that. But when it comes to organic shapes like circles or ovals, learn how to just do them in like a pixel art thing, because that's pretty easy, and that's basically what this is too. So the next step, of course, after building all of these shapes out, is to fill in all of the walls. And so I'm going to go ahead and fill in all the walls, and that'll help us get a better idea of what these shapes are going to be practically, like the purpose they serve and how they're going to look ultimately when they're not these giant colorful things that I've constructed. I'll show you what I mean. With the walls in, you can see that this is actually starting to look like a house now, which I guess is good since that's what it is. Now, obviously, does it look good yet? No, but the interest is clearly there. In fact, I would argue that this thing it's getting scarily close to being as good as this little build here, despite the amount of effort I put into texturing and detailing and stuff. This has 0 details, 0 texture, and somehow it's almost as good. Now, I want to highlight a quick point before I go in detail and texture this whole thing, and that is that this whole process of dividing a build up into different shapes also helps make it much easier to texture a build, much easier and much more approachable, because you can texture this build one segment at a time. Just focus on the foundation, and then just focus on this little square, and then just focus on this one of these sides of this rectangle, each of the sides of this rectangle that are divided by this segment right here. It just helps you divide things up, which makes detailing a lot easier because you can go segment by segment. You don't have to try and just take in an entire build at once. I don't really have much more to say about this portion of the build. I'm going to go ahead and finish it, and then I'll give you my notes on the final things that you'll need to know about shapes, and just wrap it up, basically. Let's do a cool transition, and ready, and 3, and 2, and 1. And woo! Ah, look at that. It's here. I need a good shot of this. I need to get this thing out of here. Yeah, and check this out. It's done. Well, at least mostly done. I just realized something is wrong. Hold on. This is not symmetrical at all. There we go. Well, here it is. The build is complete, mostly, except I could not be bothered to do the back, so it's Grian reference? This is a Grian reference. We'll call it that. There's a few final points I would like to make now. So you can still see the original shapes we had in the build. Mostly, right? Here's the first shape right there, and here is the second one, this rectangle, and then here's another rectangle, here's another rectangle, here's the tower, right, and then that was a cylinder, and here's a rectangle, and they're all still here. All the shapes are the exact same as they were, but if you didn't know what to look for, you wouldn't necessarily be able to see them, and that's just because of the detailing, but the shapes are the exact same. I haven't done anything else. I made the tower skinnier here in the middle, but outside of that, like, it's the same. Speaking of the tower, I did want to also say that you can change the shapes. Like, they're not the end-all be-all. When you put down that wireframing, when you put your wool down or whatever block you're using, that's not the final shape, right? That's just a planning phase, and if you put the build up and it looks too big or whatever, like I felt like this tower was a bit too big, so I shrunk it in by a block, that's perfectly fine. It's just to help you get an idea of what you're going to do. So I kind of want to reiterate the purpose of shapes and what it helped accomplish in this build compared to this build right here, and that's literally interest. I didn't do much else with the build. It's very similar. It doesn't look like it's similar, but it is. You can see the same elements transferred over from this build into this one. I tried to keep them about the same. So you can see the foundation is the same. It's just bigger, and then the walls are the same texture, and the chimney here is the same, and the roof is the same. Where the big differences lie, outside of this one being much larger, is there are a couple of things that are not in this build, like this wooden jut out thing, whatever you'd call that here, and also this other part of the build right here, the sandstone part. And the way I came up with these ideas is that I used the shapes to force me to come up with a new idea, because now I have a bunch of shapes, as you could see, like this original rectangle here and this one right here, that if I just continue to do the exact same thing, it would get really repetitive, and so it gives you, it like naturally divides areas up for you to vary. You have a rectangle here that you can vary up, and it doesn't force you to do it, but it really helps in that. And same with this rectangle, like I can have a bunch of separate spaces, or separate parts of the build that are already divided up. So that way I know where I can add variations in a way that would make sense. I hope that makes sense. I don't know if that made sense. Hopefully it made sense. Hopefully you can just kind of see that by looking at this. But obviously the composition of the build is doing most of the heavy lifting. I actually avoided adding too many details. Like, I could add more details. I could add planters and other stuff. I could add a whole bunch of details to this, but I tried to keep it simple, just to really highlight the point that the shape of the build does most of the work. The texturing is the same from this build to this build, right? And most of the elements are the same. It's just that I spent the time before I started the build to plan out my build by using shapes. So when you're looking at a build like this, whether you're looking at someone else's build or a reference photo or whatever you're doing, break it down into shapes. What shapes do you see here? Do you see a rectangle here? Do you see one here? Do you see one here? Do you see the triangular prism cylinders? Look for shapes like that. And when you have an idea for a build, try and use those shapes to help you shape it. Or even better, if you don't have an idea and you're just winging it like I was with this thing, just put some random shapes down until you get something that looks cool, and that kind of will help to give you an idea of what to do with the rest of the build, because I vaguely had the idea of like medieval style house, and when I put down all of those shapes in the wireframing earlier, I was able to come up with the idea of how I was going to detail the rest of these things. There's not too much more to say about this whole topic. I think I was pretty clear with it, but I just want to reiterate the main takeaway that you should have from this entire video, and that is, when you're planning out builds, or when you're looking at builds or reference photos, break it down into simple shapes. Break it down into a bunch of rectangles, or cylinder, or, you know, triangles, or whatever. Really, really simple elementary school art class kind of shapes, and they kind of fit together like a puzzle or something like that. Just experiment with them, and that will really help elevate your builds to the next level, because if you can do something like this, then you can instantly build something like this. And even if, you know, your detailing and stuff and texturing isn't at this level yet, then this will be just like, this will make a huge difference. Planning out your builds with different shapes, making a bunch of different shapes and putting them together to create an overall more interesting structure is going to make a much bigger difference than anything you can do on this little build, like the texturing or whatever. Because again, when I textured this at the beginning of the video, it really didn't do much for the build. It went from bad to like kind of still bad, but maybe a little less bad. Whereas I did the exact same texturing and detailing over here, and it's significantly better just because of the extra effort I put into the beginning, which kind of led to additional ideas and effort and details. They came naturally. The texturing makes more sense. All that good stuff. We will cover many other topics later in this series, so if you're wanting to learn how to build, follow along and subscribe, because then you will get to see more videos of mine, and I will go over so many more building tips. Let me know if you have any questions about anything I talked about today. I don't know if I covered everything perfectly, since I never write a script for this stuff. I just kind of wing it, so let me know if you have any questions, if nothing made sense. If you have any additional tips that you want regarding this, leave comments. I will answer. However, other than that, that's going to do it for today. So again, if you want to take your building to something like this to the next level, then subscribe, please. That would be great. I'm not begging. I promise I'm not. We're going to cover a whole bunch of stuff coming up in the building guide in the future, so look forward to that. Also, if you have only seen this video or my other building guide video, I have a Forever Worlds Minecraft survival series running alongside this, which I think is better, so check that out if you're interested. That is all. I will see everyone in the next episode, or the next part, or whatever. I don't know what I'm calling these. Bye.